The Wasatch Report, shooting straight on everything from prepping to politics.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Wasatch Report. I'm Suzanne Sherman. I will be your host for the next hour here at the Cerberus Radio Network, where we defend freedom and liberty from the flames of tyranny. Jeff Johnson is manning the controls here in the studio today. It's going to be just you and me, Jeff. We've had 3 and 4 people on with us at the same time, and you do all the work, but you don't get to do any of the contributing. So today, Jeff's going to share some insight on some gun laws coming out of his home state of Pennsylvania. I'll get you updated on some local legislation out here in the Wasatch back in Utah, and then share some other interesting stories that I've selected for you. I think you're going to like. Want to thank you for joining us today. You can follow us on Facebook, facebook.com/Cerberus Radio Network. CRN is our fan page. More people are joining. Thank you for our new members there. We have a YouTube page as well by the same name, Cerberus Radio Network. I've been going through some of the past broadcasts, and on the air, I can't see the comments, but I do want to thank those of you that are joining in the conversation there and sending your welcomes from wherever everybody is. It's nice to see those. And then Jeff will share if you have any specific questions or comments or concerns. Jeff can share them with me and we can address them on the air. You can also send them to my Facebook page, Suzanne Sherman, as well. And I can read them when I'm on the air and address them as well. I'm still serving hard time in the Facebook Correctional Facility. As of, I think today, I've got maybe 18 more days left in case they find something. They might find another 8-year-old comment and ban me once again anew. But fear not, there's another means by which I can reach out to you. SuzanneCSherman.com is my brand new website. Yes, it's a work in progress, but I've already managed to link my published articles. You can find them all in one spot. It was really hard to get them all together. I love 10th Amendment Center. My articles are just really hard to find there. So you can't do a search by my name on there. So interestingly enough, when I was searching to find them all, Jeff, I was surprised at how many other websites with regards to the Constitution and government have actually republished them. So that was kind of cool to see. But now you can find them all in one place. I have a social media bar on there where if you can click to Facebook, it'll take you to my radio page. And if I'm ever out of Facebook jail, I can go back to contributing to that. And we have our SoundCloud page there as well as the YouTube page. You can access all of those. We also are planning to do a network Cerberus media website as well. I know Junk Bond Carpenter is working on that. So we're trying to get around being so dependent on Facebook and Twitter to get our message out. We had somebody contact us as well. And this is just really, it was an honor to hear somebody ask how they can sponsor our show. I'm going to get in touch with my tech guys over at Sweetwater. They've been very helpful. And Jeff, I don't know why I didn't think of it sooner to talk to them about how we can resolve our telephone issues. I love taking live calls. It's a lot of fun. You never know what you're going to get. And it's always, we've got the greatest listeners and followers. So we're really looking forward to getting a voice back for you. But thank you for everybody that's supporting our network, joining our pages, following me on my new website. I also have a blog out there. We talked about a little bit yesterday about some food preservation issues. I've always had a concern with these shelf life, 25 years or more freeze-dried meal sources. And I shared an article on my page that linked, it was a blog that links to an article about a class action lawsuit with one such supplier. Again, you want to get away from looking at one source for all your food needs. The article linked to the blog as well explains why. So that being said, we have a little bit of good news out here in Utah. A couple weeks ago, we talked about a stand your ground law that was being presented. We know that some of the anti-gun personal defense enemies, some of these politicians are trying to impose upon free citizens a duty and obligation to retreat from somebody who wishes to cause us harm. I've quoted the wonderful late Colonel Jeff Cooper, who says the only honorable response to violence is an overwhelming show of counter-violence. I am of that mindset. I believe if you try to get away from, turn your back on an enemy who is still able to harm you, I think that is very foolish. I think the ultimate goal of these politicians who want to impose this requirement upon us, they talk about being concerned about our safety, but the ultimate mission for them is to disarm us. That being said, the Stand Your Ground law passed in Utah. Also, it's too bad Junk Bond isn't here today, but when we do our next Waking Up Cerberus, we'll talk a little bit more about this. But we have a Utah bill that just passed, and it's going to ban warrantless access to information in the cloud. And this is said to help hinder federal surveillance. And this was a bill that was filed in the Utah House, and this is just passed. Requires police to get a warrant before accessing data stored in the cloud. Proposed law, again, this has been signed. This article is a month old, but this just passed. The law would not only increase privacy protections, it would also hinder the federal surveillance state. It's kind of interesting to me, Jeff, that Utah is all of a sudden interested in hindering the federal surveillance state when we have allowed this debacle, monstrosity of the NSA data center to just be left like a big old steaming turd right in the middle of our state here. We are supplying them with millions of gallons of water, precious water that we need for our population to fund this beast, to feed this beast here, keep it quenched, keep these machines cool. But all of a sudden now we're concerned about protecting our privacy. Anyway, I digress. Representative, going back to the article, Craig Hill out of West Valley, filed this bill in December, and it would prohibit law enforcement agencies from accessing electronic information or data transmitted to a remote computing device without a warrant in most situations. In effect, it would prohibit police from warrantlessly accessing information uploaded to the cloud. HB 57 was the title of it, would expand existing laws already on the books in Utah requiring police to get a warrant before accessing location information, stored data, transmitted data. We call this metadata. And as Greg Carpenter, our cybersecurity expert, explained on another show, and he contributed to my article also butchering the Fourth Amendment, published by the 10th Amendment Center. Again, go to SuzanneCSherman.com and you can find it there. We have this theory that this third-party doctrine, that any information transmitted to third-party sources, you lose your expectation of privacy, and that's not protected. So this addresses that concern. Current law requires police to get a warrant before accessing data from third-party providers. As Greg explained, this metadata, for instance, can tell a lot about you. It can tell authorities what your habits are, what your preferences are, where you go, who you hang out with. It pretty much tells people everything about you. This article continues. It has become standard practice for law enforcement agencies to upload warrantless surveillance data gathered at the state level to federal fusion centers operated by the DHS and other federal agencies. The fusion centers serve as clearinghouses for all kinds of information shared between federal, state, and local law enforcement agencies, including data gathered by surveillance cameras, drones, intercepted cell phone, email communications, social network spying, and other invasive models or modes of surveillance. The DHS funds and ultimately runs 79 fusion centers across the U.S. They describe the Homeland Security Intelligence Information Fusion as, and here's a quote, the process of managing the flow of information to support the rapid identification of emerging terrorism-related threats requiring intervention by government and private sector authorities. So, Jeff, this is really just to keep us all safe. And this is what we talk about all the time. We are losing our liberties minute by minute under the auspices of being kept safe. And let's see, I just pushed my screen and got into another article. So the fusion centers operate within a broader federal system. They call this Information Sharing Environment, or ISE. According to the website here, the ISE provides analysts, operators, and investigators with information needed to enhance national security. Well, let's jump the rails here a little bit. National security is the means by which the feds have jumped their constitutional restraints with regards to the border, with regards to our civil liberties. We see this all the time. Interestingly enough, though, this is also supposed to ban the use of stingrays. So this is going to be interesting. They say here it would expand existing laws already on the books in Utah requiring police to get a warrant before accessing local information, stored data, transmitted data from an electronic device. And for people who say, well, that's okay, we have the third-party doctrine, I submit to you, try to communicate with your friends otherwise. Even if you use a landline, you could be using your landline to connect to somebody else's cell phone. We have no safe harbor in this age of information and technology when it comes to our persons, papers, homes, and effects. It's all up for grabs. I think this law sets a good precedent, but I don't think it goes. How effective is this really going to be? Because they have that little most instances exception there. But let's look at this also with regard to stingrays. They effectively ban the warrantless use of stingrays. These devices essentially spoof cell phone towers, tricking any device within range to connecting to the stingray center instead of your cell tower, allowing law enforcement to sweep up communications content as well as locate and track the person in possession of a specific phone or electronic device. Current law also requires police to get a warrant before accessing electronic data from third-party providers. Also, the passage of this bill now is going to further limit the ability of law enforcement agencies to warrantlessly gather electronic information and data. And this impacts federal programs because it has become standard practice for law enforcement agencies to upload warrantless surveillance data gathered at the state level to federal fusion centers operated by the DHS. So these centers are clearinghouses for all kinds of information, again, shared between these three. So this is decent news, but again, I still don't have faith that our communications are subject to any expectation of privacy. But then again, we have those out here that say, well, if you've got nothing to hide, you shouldn't be worried. I remember, Jeff, this was the primary debate when the Patriot Act came out, and I was of that mindset as well. I was so shaken. I was so rattled by what happened on 9/11 when, my hero, George W. Bush, this is how uninformed I was, was putting this out there. I thought, well, that's great. We've been attacked on our own soil. Clearly, we need to get really aggressive to keep us safe. And it's amazing if you're open-minded enough to look at information, say what you want about social media. We get access to sources we would never have access to. People like us can have radio shows and reach out and try and inform those that are getting their information from the traditional news sources who have a vested interest in not speaking the truth to them. You want to comment on that, Jeff? And then after that, I think you've got some news with regards to gun control regulations out your way. How are we doing? And hello to everybody in our YouTube chat, by the way.
Yes, welcome to everyone in the YouTube chat. I was just saying hello to everyone there. So anyway, as far as this whole privacy thing, really, if they applied our state constitutions, Article 1, Section 8 of the Pennsylvania Constitution is our protections from government. It's a statement of a negative against government. It's not saying I wasn't giving me a right. Again, even the Pennsylvania Constitution, it's not a list of rights. It's a negative. It's a response to government telling them what they can't do. If we applied our Constitution, we would be in a better spot today. So, yes. And I'm sure Utah has the same thing. I'm sure you have one. But again, it's just like the federal Constitution, which was, we all know the whole story of that anyway. But as far as they ignore it, and even I saw an article the other day about somebody wanted some, no, it was Mike Lee. or your senator wanted some law. Well, yes. All we need is one more law. All we need is one more amendment, and they will obey. Yeah, right. So yes.
I actually am going to get into a bill that he's proposing, but as you've said before, the Pennsylvania Constitution says that the right to keep and bear firearms shall not be questioned. Now, keeping that in mind, can you please explain to us, and I'm not going to ask you to reconcile it because I don't think you can, but bearing in mind, no pun intended, the Pennsylvania citizens' right to keep and bear firearms shall not be questioned. Let's play a little compare and contrast. Tell me about this new law that's being proposed in Pennsylvania.
Yep. So I'll read. I was going to read Article 1, Section 21. That's in the Pennsylvania Constitution. That is the heading on that article is, or that section is, right to bear arms. So right from the Pennsylvania Constitution, the right of the citizen to bear arms in defense of themselves. So they even acknowledge we have a right that they cannot take away, inherent in us, to defend ourselves, and the state shall not be questioned. So that's Pennsylvania's right to bear arms section.
Based on Pennsylvania's Constitution as written and ratified, I'm going to assume that you don't have a single state firearm law.
Yeah, right. So we have these Democrats. This is an article from Ammo Land. It's by a John Crump from March 12th. So it was just today's what, the 13th? So yesterday. And it's a House Bill 0768, known as the Firearms Registration Act. I'm not going to read it word for word, but it'll require gun owners in Pennsylvania to provide the state police with make, model, serial number of all their guns. Everyone, pistols, shotguns, rifles, everything. Along with the application, the owner must swear an oath. The gun owner would have to submit fingerprints, photographs, no older than 30 days, go through the background check that you went through to buy the gun on every firearms. So you have 30 guns, you'd have to go through 30 background checks. And believe me, they're going to charge you for those. It doesn't say that here, but they will.
Now, this isn't for a concealed carry permit. This is just to have.
Register your firearms.
Okay.
This is their bill. In addition, they must provide the state police with your home and work addresses and phone numbers, social security number, date of birth, age, sex, and citizenship. And I'm going to read this line from this because this is true. The requirement is more information than a person needs to vote. That's from the article that from John Quam. So here's the go. So if the state police decides to reject the person, they have 10 days to appeal. The owner must turn in their firearms to the state police within 3 days. So you haven't even appealed yet. You have 3 days to turn all your firearms in before you even appeal it. And if you don't appeal within 10 days, here another quote, their right is forfeit. So your natural right is to self-defense is gone because you didn't register your firearm or they rejected you. There's no information here why they reject you. So they can reject you for any reason. The gun owner cannot transfer them. And if you're merely holding an unregistered firearm at the range, you've committed a crime. You must keep the guns either disassembled or bound by trigger locks, even if there's no children in the home. Let's see. And if you change jobs or address, you have 48 hours to change your stuff, or you've committed a crime. And finally, the certificate, which costs $10 per firearm, will expire after 1 year. After the 1 year, you have 60 days before the expiration to do this all over again. Pay every fee for every firearm you have every year, 60 days before it all ends. This is blatantly unconstitutional by Pennsylvania Constitution. I don't think this is going to go anywhere, but this is where we're headed. The Marxists are winning, and they're not going to give up ground. They want to take away our firearms. That's all there is to it.
We can say, I don't think this is going to go anywhere, but the fact that it's even brought up and thought out to this degree, what might seem far-fetched today is going to be tomorrow's reality if people don't wake the hell up. This new Green Deal everybody's laughing about, I think every presidential candidate on the Democratic ticket is embracing it. Nancy Pelosi finally came out, I think, and said Medicaid for all is not affordable. But what's going to happen with this new guard coming in with the Democrat Party particularly is the rank and file, the old guard Democrat Party members are going to be shamed into capitulating to them. We already see Pelosi covering up for anti-Semitic statements made by this junior congresswoman out of Michigan. And she's just trying to justify it, but, saying her cultural experiences were different. And we see them, circle the wagons around this very radical speech given by these new congressmen and congresswomen. So I think it's really imperative to understand that even though a piece of legislation might not seem to be going somewhere right now, if you combine this with the indoctrination in the education systems, the media outlets, the government itself going against firearm ownership, this is going to go somewhere. Look at the SAFE Act in New York. It overnight created an entire class of thousands of felons who just mere hours before were law-abiding citizens. Same in Colorado. You have to turn in or register your...
Go to that section of the article. I forgot all about that. And let's see. Other states have tried registration bans. New Jersey had 0 magazines turned in since the magazine ban went into effect. New York saw nearly 1 million firearms. And it was more than that because they figure there's about 2 million semi-automatics in New York, and they had a couple 100,000. So they had like 1.8 million not register in New York. Same thing in Connecticut when 50,000 of 350,000 registered their semi-autos. This is what's going to happen. It's going to be massive because if New York has 2 million, I would almost guarantee you there's probably about 4 million people in Pennsylvania that have these firearms because they're very, very, very common here. It might even be more than that. There might be 6 million for all I know. So there's going to be massive. What's the? I can't come up with the term, but people are going to ignore the law. Is what's going to come down to it if they would ever pass it.
Yeah, we need civil disobedience and massive non-compliance. If that fails, what you need to do is educate your community about jury nullification. If you are sitting as a juror and you're going to adjudicate a case of somebody failing to register their firearm, and you personally believe that that law, either on its face or as applied, is unjust, you not only have the right to refuse to convict, you have an obligation to. If you discuss this right of jury nullification, you're accused of jury tampering. I submit to you, the very justice system itself is guilty of jury tampering. When the judge, through their jury instructions, tells free, law-abiding, sovereign citizens that they have compelled by a summons to sit before them and judge the law, whether or not the facts presented, they're going to decide the facts. If you find that the facts as presented occurred, you have absolutely no choice but to convict. That is what they will tell you. And that is a lie. The very court themselves are committing the crime of jury tampering. But when the law does it, when members of the government do it, it's okay. Jeff, I was driving back from Park City yesterday, and I had a state trooper go flying past me on that little mountain pass. They're probably going 85 miles an hour. There were no lights on. There was nothing. He just came flying up from behind me and going on his merry way. If I had done that, oh boy, howdy, I'd have been pulled over. That's why I have a radar detector. So, these laws, they are coming for our firearms rights. We had another one. Let's talk about, there's another.
Hold on a second, Suzanne. Before we move on.
Yeah.
Ed commented in our chat. And again, I want to always acknowledge statements in the chat because right now that's the only way people can get their 2 cents worth. It says, Jeff, I bet It was Ed in our chat. Jeff, I bet the NRA will support it in secret, so after it passes, they can get more money to fight it. And that's the truth, because look at the bump stock ban, everything else that's going on in Washington. They support it, and then they come to everyone and goes, "Oh, we need to fight Washington D.C. and their gun control overreach." Well, yeah, whatever.
Yeah, it's a huge moneymaker for them, just like national reciprocity. And I think, I don't know if my membership's expired or not, but I was very proud at one time to say I was a member of the National Rifle Association. I will never renew my fee. They finally stopped calling me. But I got a call one time and they said, we are working to fight gun control in Congress. And then I could see her smiling in the phone, in my little mind. And she's saying, but we're also going to work with Congress to pass pro-gun laws. I said, see, there's where you lose me. Because Congress has no authority to pass regulations with regards to firearms at all. But if they can get something like national reciprocity passed and all the lawsuits that are going to come about it, California does not want people like me from Utah coming in there. Utah's a shall issue state. I don't have a permit. Does that mean I can open carry in California, or only permits are going to be valid? Okay, let's say I have a concealed carry permit. A concealed carry permit allows me here in Utah to open carry with a round in the chamber. You don't need to have a permit to open carry in Utah, but I can still legally do one or carry with a round in the chamber if I have a concealed carry permit. Does that allow me to go and open carry in California? California is going to run to federal court so fast. And for the clowns on the radio, this guy in Arizona, a couple of them in Arizona, I've debated, oh, well, the Supreme Court will figure it all out and sort it out. Well, that worked great for 60+ million dead, murdered babies and counting, didn't it? So you're going to end up with firearms laws more like California's and less like Utah's, Wyoming's, Arizona's, etc. This is a bad idea, but it's a huge moneymaker for the NRA, who also loves to pretend that they like you said, Jeff, they backed up the bump stock ban. And shame on all of you gun owners who said, well, it's okay, we really don't need bump stocks. This is the problem when we have so-called conservatives that just bend over and accept these regulations because Trump's doing it. If Obama put forth the bump stock ban, you guys would be losing your stuff. Are you ready to? There's this article from Ammo Land, and a Democrat in Florida is proposing a ban on social media gun pictures. And again, this is about what they're saying. Gun control is total control. Now, Jeff, based on our previous conversation with metadata, with the gun registration, I think anybody at this point is insane to post pictures on social media of them with firearms. I had told you before, when I was uploading some pictures when I was sitting out in my backyard with some deer and my chickens, and when I put them on Facebook, I couldn't see them. But what I did see was what Greg had told me are called metadata tags. And they had categorized, based on the images in the photos, my pictures that I upload. And it said trees and nature. I bet they have a category for firearms. And if they want to do a quick query, they can do that and find out everything you have about guns. And they can use this against you. Let's say this law passes in Pennsylvania. Let's do a cross reference with the gun registration that they have available. And you know what? They're holding a gun that wasn't available or that wasn't registered. And guess what? The law had already passed. So we're going to go and arrest these people. This isn't tinfoil hat stuff, folks. We need to wake up. It's going to be our reality if we don't start fighting this. So here's an article here. Again, this is from Ammo Land. If you post, here's a Democrat, Florida, Jason Pizzo. He said, if you post it on social media, there's probable cause for us to come and get the guns out of your house. And he said this in a video 3 years ago. This is a recent article, though. He said, that's it. It's now on you to explain why you have a gun in your house and why it's on social media. Jeff, this is just like the law you proposed or you were talking about in Pennsylvania, where the burden shifts. It's on you to convince them that your rights shouldn't be violated. This is not due process. What did President Trump say that people seem to not have a problem with? First, we'll take the guns, then we'll worry about due process. This is let's play compare and contrast to candidate Trump. I support the Second Amendment. We need to enforce the laws we already have. Well, here he is already now capitulating. Also saying he's willing to work with Dianne Feinstein and entertain the notion of an assault rifle ban. Where was the outrage? Yeah.
Article 1, Section 4, Florida Constitution, freedom of speech and press. Every person may speak, write, publish sentiments on all subjects, but shall not
no guns.
But be responsible for abuse of that right. So if you're libeling somebody or defaming somebody, that's not protected. So there's no problem with that. No law shall be passed to restrain or abridge the liberty of speech or of the press. It goes on from there about the whole defamation stuff, but the rest, that's the gist of it.
Yeah. So once again, we have, this is the problem. When I tell people to refer to your own state constitutions rather than running to the federal judiciary, well, you've got these local tyrants that disobey and disregard their own parameters within which they can frame legislation. So what are we left with here? I don't know. We have tyrants. It seems to be that these positions of political power, and I'm going to discuss this tomorrow on the air, Mr. Sociopath Goes to Washington, but I submit to you that positions of power attract people who should be the least trusted with that very same power. Let me get back to this article quickly. This politician was stumping at the time to change the law to deny the right to keep and bear arms to young adults old enough to vote. They can marry, they can sign binding contracts, and serve in the military. So we will send you off to kill people that are no threat to us in, I don't know, the Congo. But don't for a minute think you could put a picture of you and your hunting rifle on Facebook. Pending this law, he wants parents to call the police on their children if they saw them posting pictures with videos and guns online. These politicians are trying to turn citizens into a bunch of little brown shirts. Remember, the Nazis wanted their kids to turn their parents in, neighbors to turn their parents in. We saw a homeschool, or not a homeschool, but a homework assignment from a public school telling kids to effectively list what the medications are in their parents' medicine cabinet. I can think of no area where you should have a reasonable expectation of privacy than your medicine cabinet, in your bathroom, in your home. Personal privacy and liberty means nothing to these tyrants. And again, tyranny is a mindset. Political leadership is a vocation that seems to attract these tyrants. Once they get in there, they cannot help themselves. There's no question that if you're a parent and have a dependent child in your home, what they are doing, what they have access to, what goes on under your roof are your business. How you handle that parental authority is your call, or it should be. Depending on circumstances, alerting the police may be a viable option. Just be aware that their vested interest in their own safety and protocols will follow to ensure it. It will take precedence. You may come to regret that you didn't try to resolve matters another way. Case in point, a family called the police on a son that they had that was exhibiting suicidal tendencies. So the police put an end to that. They showed up and shot him. So if you're going to rat out your kids for putting a picture on Facebook, it may be their death warrant. Fast forward to the present and a new climate in Florida where even some Republicans are scrambling to support citizen disarmament edicts. This is why I just don't like to point the finger at the Democrats, because the Republicans are every bit as complicit. And they also capitulate to these points. Again, case in point with the AR I mentioned with President Trump's commentary to Feinstein. He should have been absolutely outraged at the very proposition, because that would have been in conformance with his promise as a presidential candidate. So he's now pushing a bill, this Democrat Pizzo, along with lock up your safety infringements, makes posting or publishing a picture of a firearm, a BB gun, or gas operated gun or device that is displayed to resemble a firearm. I wonder, Jeff, if that what do they call, the Pop-Tart in the shape of a gun would be included. Do you remember that case? A little boy ate a Pop-Tart and it looked like a gun, and they suspended him from school. It made national headlines, pardon my French. So let's see, BB gun, any device that will resemble a firearm on social media by minors will be a criminal act that will result in guns being promptly seized by a law enforcement officer and disposed of, and other penalties. He's not asking parents to do the snitching, but the mere existence of a non-compliant post will be enough probable cause to prompt a raid. Now, here is an example of why everybody gets our constitutional framework screwed up. Here's an article, very factual, puts out the case for why this law is bad, but now for their analysis, they turn to a law professor. I refer you to my article by the published by the Abbeville Institute, The Problem with Lawyers and the Constitution. Jeff, see if you can point out the glitch here. This is an obvious First Amendment violation. The statute isn't limited to displays that constitute true threats of violence. There's a First Amendment exception for such true threats or possession of guns by minors in violation of state law. Indeed, it would be a crime for a minor to post a photo of himself lawfully using a gun at a shooting range under this law. So let's pick this expert's quote apart. First of all, this is not a First Amendment violation. This is a state law.
And what did I read? I read the Constitution that matters in this case, and it's not the First Amendment.
Yep. These law professors forget there is even such a thing as the 10th Amendment or state constitutions. Why? As I explained, this is our training as future legislators, politicians, lawyers. The malfeasance of the legal education industry indoctrinates us into falsely believing that there's only one constitution. And when you're studying for the bar exam, they will tell you when you have the multiple choice day, they call it the multi-state, and you have to choose between the 10th Amendment and the 14th Amendment, which, as we know, unconstitutionally applies the Bill of Rights to the states in direct contravention to our founding and ratification principles. The 14th Amendment is always the right answer. The 14th Amendment is always the wrong answer. If I were to take the bar exam right now, applying what I know today and applying the historically and legally correct answers, I would fail. But they go on, and these people, because they have that little name tag that says law professor on it, they are presumed to be experts in this field. People will reach out to them, they comment, and they do not get the facts right. That's why we are where we are today. So we have what happened here. We have a March for Our Lives critic, this kid that went to the range with this. What?
It was feedback or something, because I said nothing.
Okay, so there was a kid here that was a critic of March for Our Lives, and he found himself snitched on. He summoned, isolated, interrogated, and intimidated by school authorities who proved useless during a real threat out in Florida. Remember, they absolutely were. We had the coward of Broward. They hid outside rather than going inside and stopped a real threat. So if this guy's wish to enact this abomination of a law comes through, there'd be plenty more opportunities for young people to run afoul of his demands. Time magazine reports high school shooting teams are getting wildly popular. I see this on my Facebook feed. We have a trap shooting organization out here in Utah. I'm seeing all sorts of pictures of these teenage kids with their firearms. So we're going to have
our local high school, or the high school up there, Jason has a trap team. They shoot every Sunday afternoon. And I've posted on Facebook video of him shooting there. So I would have committed a crime under Florida's law if I was in Florida.
Yeah, and this is, again, this is how they silence the opposition. If you can't even have wholesome, healthy images of kids with their firearms, that takes away the opportunity for those who might become interested in them and become future enthusiasts. They're never exposed to it. Remember, a while back, Eric Holder said we need to brainwash society against firearms and their popularity. This is no more than that. And here's what's really interesting. Here's some statistics. Again, this is supposed to be for school safety, the betterment of society. Those demanding ignorance instead of education, this is what they're not going to tell you. There was a United States Department of Justice 1994 research summary, urban delinquency and substance abuse, initial findings. While I'm sharing this, Jeff, can you please look under Article 1, Section 8 for urban delinquency and substance abuse issues and where that was ever a matter delegated to the general government. While you do that, I'm going to read this quote. Boys who own legal firearms have much lower rates of delinquency and drug use and are even slightly less delinquent than non-owners of guns. That's been born out of today's crop of young, trained, disciplined shooters accepted by a way of life back in the days before we had school shootings. You know, we had ROTC, they had marksmanship classes in schools. Then the general government tries to impose a federal gun ban on areas, I think, within 1,000 feet of schools, and then use commandeering methods, meaning state resources, to enforce these laws. That was struck down properly by the Supreme Court under the anti-commandeering theory. So this is what we're trying to do. We're trying to put lawful gun owners out there as criminals, whether or not we are, regardless of other behavior, regardless of the fact that kids that go out there and hunt and shoot are at least learning the actual means by which to handle these firearms, as opposed to many of these kids who are probably the offspring of anti-gunner parents who are probably online in their rooms with the door closed, shooting the bejesus out of people on online video games. Don't tell me that isn't happening. Parent your own kids. Leave the rest of us the heck alone. What do you think, Jeff?
Well, they can't leave us alone. They have to. This is about control. It has nothing to do with anything else. They can't control us as long as we, number one, have thinking children, or number two, have children that understand their natural rights, and three, that are trained in the safe operation of a tool, firearms. So.
Gosh, where is this hour going? I'm glad we got to take a chance or take the time to just go through those articles, but there's something else out here I wanted to bring up. Mike Lee has introduced the Article 1 Act to reclaim congressional power. I would like to see an Article 1 Act where they repeal all federal laws that are not in conformance with Article 1, but I guess that day will happen when I go out to feed my chickens and find some unicorns in the backfield as well. But Mike Lee introduced Article 1 Act today, a bill that would take back significant legislative powers given to the executive branch by the National Emergencies Act of 1976. I submit to you, if he was serious about this, he would be seeking to repeal this act, as it is a out-and-out unconstitutional act. All legislative responsibilities shall be vested in the Congress. Once again, we have an unconstitutional delegation of their power, just like the War Powers Act. Specifically, going back to Mike Lee's statement here, the bill would automatically end all future emergency declarations made pursuant to the act after 30 days, just like the War Powers Act. We have this little window where the king can do whatever he wants. 30 days unless Congress voted affirmatively to extend the emergency. Currently, Congress can cancel an emergency declaration only by passing a resolution that can withstand a presidential veto. If Congress is troubled by recent emergency declarations made pursuant to the act, they have only themselves to blame, Senator Lee said. Now, here's my question, Jeff. A while back, a few weeks ago, we actually did a show about this National Emergencies Act, and we said how many times this has been invoked, how many times it was invoked under President Obama. With regards to countries in Africa and the Middle East, that has nothing to do with us here. Do you remember that show, Jeff? I always forget a lot of shows, but I remember that one.
Yeah, I remember.
Where was Mike Lee?
Sometimes because people say, well, and I'll try to sit back and I'll go, when did we do that? Man, all these shows. And honestly, I think on YouTube we're closing in on 300 episodes on YouTube. We're into the 200s on SoundCloud, because I opened up SoundCloud after we started storing stuff there. So, I mean, there are so many episodes out there. I mean, you could start listening one a day, and for a year, and you finally get through most of all of our shows.
Spend your time listening to that. Turn off the mainstream stuff. You're not going to learn anything there. Listen to what we have to say. We don't chase the headlines. We try to bring you the stuff that's really going to affect you in the future if you don't heed our warning. You don't heed our warnings now. But again, thank you for all your work on getting those up to date there. But my question with regards to Mike Lee's all of a sudden action, where was he during the previous administration with all these executive authority decisions, when without any congressional approval, all of this was going? He was silent during the Obama administration on this with regards to the National Emergencies Act, as far as I know. But now Lee's more of an open border guy. He wants more unrestricted immigration. This seems to be something with the LDS Church. They compare these immigrants and refugees with the Mormons coming out here to escape persecution. And it's a false narrative. It's a false comparison here. But here's what he says all of a sudden now. So my concern is this is what's motivating him, is his personal feeling about immigration. And that's really what this is in response to, because as we know, President Trump is trying to invoke the National Emergencies Act to get the wall built. And, there are two ways to examine this. And I try to tell people, if you look at the Constitution as ratified, the founders intended immigration to be regulated by the states. It's not the same as naturalization. People conflate the two. And then when they realize, if you point out the fact that the two are inherently different principles, requiring inherently different venues of and types of regulation, they'll just say, oh, well, you know what? You have to immigrate before you can be naturalized. Please stop making this up as you go along, folks. If you're going to invoke constitutional authority, then you cannot agree with federal immigration laws. But, Suzanne, you need to be practical. Okay, let's be practical. The Constitution.
I want to go off on a tangent on that a little bit.
Okay.
I'm not going to. It's not a rant, just a kind of a little tangent. So people are saying if you have to immigrate before you can naturalize. So basically, you're saying that because they're naturalizing, they're inferring they have power to regulate immigration. So if you're going to infer things, that means that words have no meaning. So if that's the case, then you must accept, everyone out there that's an NRA member, anyone that's a conservative that believes in our right to self-defense, you must agree then that because they can arm the militia, that means it infers that they can disarm us, and that every gun control and gun confiscation is constitutional. Then if you're going to infer, if you're not going to do the direct meaning, and that words have meaning and they said what they meant, then they can do whatever they want. You can infer anything out of any sentence of the Constitution.
Exactly. And a constitution by implication is like having no constitution whatsoever. We have this debate going back to the national banks, where Alexander Hamilton said that thanks to the necessary and proper clause, that there is an implied power. Well, again, a constitution by implication is no constitution at all. It takes us full circle to the cause of our war for independence, which was not a revolutionary war. It was a war for independence. The Americans that fought for their independence from the Brits, they were seeking their traditional rights as Englishmen. A revolutionary war is when you seek to usurp the traditional values and culture and start a whole new one. That takes us into another article about a civil war. Is there a second civil war? And what really got me curious about this was from the American Thinker. It was just published on March 1st of this year. Again, looking at the false narrative, just using the words. I tell people all the time, national and federal have been now considered synonyms. They're not synonymous. They were completely oppositional terms when the Constitution was being debated. Well, we have another misnomer, and that is the Civil War. And that was Lincoln's war against Southern independence. Why do we call it a civil war? Well, the victors write history, do they not? So the Civil War implies that there were two factions competing for domination of this continental landmass, meaning, but please tell me in any of the historical documents where it shows that the Southern states, the Confederated States of America, sought to overthrow Washington, D.C., sought to rule the northern states and those that went to war and invaded them. They never did. They simply desired their right to be left alone and govern themselves as they saw fit. So what did the victors do? We call this a civil war. We obfuscate the facts of this war. And now the majority of the population is so dumbed down, they justify the killing of about 800,000 Americans as necessary to end slavery. Simply because something happened at the end of the war does not mean that that was the reason the war happened in the first place. Read Lincoln's words himself if you don't believe me. This is not subject to interpretation, folks. So we've got to get beyond the lies. So that was my first comment there with regards to, is the second Civil War coming? We never had a first one. In reply, the article says here, he believes, this author, that the second Civil War has already begun and the opening shots were fired when Obama said we are 5 days away from fundamentally transforming the United States of America. And Jeff, that brought back a lot of memories. I remember seeing that speech on TV, and I couldn't help but wonder, what does he mean by that? What did he mean by that? Most of the country is center-right, they say here, and never considered America a place that needed transformation. Most people can think of things that they would change, but few believe the nation needs to be torn down and rebuilt. Here's the problem. Again, these analysts, they approach our societal issues as being national in nature. Everything now becomes a point of contention, and we are seeing violence as a result of this. People like me, people like Michael Bolden, who is also promoting the state sovereignty. Again, this was what was consented to when the Constitution was ratified. He's considered an extremist by Think Progress. When you use the word extremist, you have connotations of somebody that's violent. This is a peace-loving guy that's seeking solutions where everybody has a seat at the table vis-a-vis local legislation and representation through your states. We do not have a representative form of government. When you look to Washington, D.C. and unelected bureaucrats dictating what kind of education your children are going to have, what kind of firearms policies you're going to have, how you can heat your home, what kind of light bulbs you can have, what kind of cars you can drive, what kind of power you can hook up to. This is not a representative form of government. And then when there's further disagreement on that, we're going to go to the black robe messiahs. Now we've got one supposed representative for every, 30 million people. And they don't even do their own research. They have clerks do it. We don't even know who these law clerks are. Do you honestly, do you even remotely assume Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg wrote her own opinion in that civil asset forfeiture case? Hell no. I doubt she even signed the thing herself. Go ahead, Jeff.
I just want to ask a question. Center right what? the article said that the country is mostly center right.
I don't know what that means.
What? What does that even mean? Center right Marxist? Because and even then, what does that mean? I mean, does it mean that we accept just 8 of the planks of communism, or 7 of the planks as opposed to all 10? What does it mean? These labels have no meanings anymore. They don't mean a thing. And don't call yourself a conservative. Don't say you're right or left. They don't mean a thing, because the vast majority of everyone in this continental landmass are good Marxists now, and that I don't. Prove me wrong. I mean, everyone out there, prove me wrong.
And we have conservatives arguing for. I shared that article yesterday, just out of Utah. Remember, our own representatives are saying we need to combat socialism by educating kids on capitalism in our compulsory public education system schools, K-12. So you're using socialism in and of itself to argue or advocate against the perils of socialism. This makes no sense.
Listen, let's use Plank 10 of the Communist Manifesto to force capitalism on the people.
And then you make the education of these systems compulsory. This is kind of funny. I have to just share this really briefly as we wrap up the show. Che Guevara, aka Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, says society has a Facebook problem. I agree with her on that, but for a different reason. What I'm sick and tired of seeing is people sitting around a table, having their phone out and on Facebook rather than talking to each other. I'm sick to death of it. This has happened to me when I've been out on dinner engagements with somebody, with people. You see this, and they're talking to friends around the world and Facebook followers and ignoring the very person who has taken the time out of their lives to sit across the table from them. Well, Suzanne, maybe you should get better company. Okay, that's arguable. So maybe that's the problem. But anyway, getting back to Che Guevara here, she's voiced concern about Facebook after ads for Elizabeth Warren's 2020 presidential campaign, were temporarily taken down by the social network. Politico first reported that Warren's ads called for the dismantling of big tech monopolies such as Facebook, Amazon, and Google had been taken down by Facebook. Facebook confirmed that it nixed the ads and then restored them. You're going to love this one, Jeff, saying they had been removed because they violated our policies against the use of our corporate logo, but the ads were restored. This is rich. It said, in the interest of allowing robust debate. Since when does Facebook allow robust debate? Well, they do if you're a leftist and you're trashing, you're trashing people that oppose them. But boy, if you're someone like me, you get ban after ban after ban after ban. Warren responded by calling Facebook a censor, and now it seems that Ocasio-Cortez, Che Guevara, is worried about the platform's power. Again, monopolies were never within the purview of the general government to regulate. The teaching, however, the education industry teaches us that it was a great thing. I studied a lot of history during my undergrad years at UCLA. We heard about the blight of the people working in the factories and how they suffered. And then the progressive movement comes along, cue the angels music from heaven shining down, raining down upon us, and the Sherman Antitrust Act, how wonderful these things were. Well, they're talking about monopolies now. Just because a monopoly business happens to be online, that doesn't mean it's good. Deep thoughts from Che Guevara. Facebook may have its own problems, but it's increasingly starting to look like society, and here the genius says, namely our democracy, has a Facebook problem. Facebook may have its own problems, but it's increasingly starting to look like our society has a Facebook problem. She's spoken critically about tech monopolies. She tweeted in January that tech firms pose an existential threat to news organizations, and celebrated when Amazon announced it was abandoning its planned HQ2 offices in New York. So again, this is politicians speaking against tech companies. And I don't think, as much as I dislike Facebook and those that are controlling these news entities or social media platforms, have a right to control everything we say. But again, are these public interest entities where they are lockstep with the government, where they're created with government money? I don't have a solution to this. I'm just trying to find a way to get around it. But we know ultimately they're trying to silence us. And we are out of time. So on behalf of the rest of us at Cerberus Radio Network, Jeff Johnson, thank you very much. Thank you for listening.